That's a great question. I think where my mind goes is you will get as much value from this as you put into it. If it's a core initiative, which we see as, you know, needing as much focus as any of our other day-to-day operations, then the success is actually fairly straightforward to get to. But if we're just putting it in just so that we can slap a logo on a website or put in a slide deck that we've implemented AI, you will have to end up putting in more work to remediate. So being super intentional early makes all the difference.
Hey, Thomas, thanks so much for joining me today. This is the AI Diaries. I have Thomas O'Rear with me. He is Senior Director of Operations, CX, Sales, and Clinical Partnerships at FuturHealth.
Great to be here today, Kate. Glad to talk to you.
You have some really interesting experience, Thomas, and you've kind of, stepped into multiple different roles in your career. So I'm excited to dig in with you and learn more. What I always like to start off with is, across your career in CX, what patterns have you seen when companies are adopting new technologies and stepping into, different initiatives like this? And are you seeing any of the same mistakes with AI?
Yeah, so in my career, what I've seen is folks will get very focused on the specific solution. So, whether it's telephony platforms back in the day, or certainly now, AI and other solutions, the biggest value in these large scale technology projects, it's less about the specific package, the specific product, but more, does this integrate well into your ecosystem? Are you able to take full advantage of the capabilities that speak to where you are in, the maturation of your business? When those are front of mind, then those projects go quite a bit more smoothly.
I love that. So you said you mentioned maturation of the business. Can you expand on that a little bit? What does that look like, and how do you determine that?
So it speaks to kind of how well are you positioned with your go-to-market strategy, the maturity of the product platform to be able to take full advantage. So using AI is a good example. There's a lot of value you can get kind of through strictly the generative experience. Customer contact support has questions where traditionally an agent would just read content from a knowledge base. The tool can do that very easy, but the power then becomes, how do you take a step further? How can you enrich that experience with your internal data, understanding subscriptions or fulfillment or insights from the customer's journey with the organization? And the third piece being, how does that then move forward into a true automation, driving self-service, being able to have customers cure their own issues? That is going to be heavily dependent on how well AI or any of these tools are going to integrate into your larger ecosystem.
Okay. Yeah, I love that. And what's unique about you is that you've been on the insight side and the execution side. And so I wanted to hear, so you've stepped into organizations before and, for lack of better terms, inherited and reorganized large teams. So if you were to walk into a 200 plus CX team tomorrow and someone said, all right, Thomas, we need you to implement AI, what would you do first before touching a single tool, or how would you start?
First thing I'd want to know is a really strong idea of the taxonomy of the issues that we're handling for customers on an ongoing basis. There's always a spectrum of very transactional requests that customers bring in that are very easy to either handle through white automation or through a generative knowledge experience. But then also understanding what are the most complex issues that our customers are bringing. What does it look like to drive a high quality workflow to be able to solve those? And then additionally, what are the best points of value? So my general thought is AI is a great tool to influence every transaction, every interaction that we have with our customers, but it's always a decision point on, is that AI forward or is that human forward? if, for example, we have a high value customer that is engaging with us and that presents an opportunity to, you know, drive a retention conversation or present options to engage with our business more fully. I want the human to be at the center of that to provide that personalized experience. And then we were thinking more in that case of, say, the Copilot opportunities. How can we empower that agent to have the right information to make the right decision at that point? Versus the more transactional work, those can be AI forward. We can provide that experience up front, but then also honor customer choice if they're moving forward and saying they want to, they want to be escalated to a human, being also prepared for that and having that context as well.
Okay, I really loved the wording. You said the best points of value. So are you saying you identify the best points of value being where do we need a human, or you're saying the best points of value of where AI could support, or a little bit of both?
It's a little of both. So my paradigm in support is ultimately we are the face of the organization, of the company and the brand to the customer. And we should always be very laser focused on when can we drive an experience that deepens their relationship, whether that's churn prevention, whether that's expansion of product space, whether that's in a consumer environment, maybe it's an upsell experience. Those end up being the real moments that matter. And so knowing that, that will definitely influence how does AI interact with that experience? Is that a human forward experience? And if so, what are the tools and the insights and the data that we can give that human to provide the most effective experiences possible?
So you look at it more as, and I think that this is kind of where the world is trending, and a best practice is AI should be a co-pilot. It, at least at the very bare minimum, it should make the human's job easier, should empower them, should amplify what they're doing.
That's exactly right. The Copilot experience, it allows us to not get bogged down in tight process and, kind of those more administrative pieces that can take up so much time in those contacts. A great example, if I'm going and helping to educate a customer on actions they need to take to, say, move them on their journey or solve a SaaS issue, if I'm in that sort of industry, at bare minimum, presenting that content, presenting that SOP to the agent, being able to do so without having to go through an laborious search and then drive for context, that just takes those dead periods in those interactions off the table. And that gives them the opportunity to really invest in, intentional listening, deep understanding and being able to help solve those issues right then and there.
I love that. The what I always find one of the things I use AI for in a daily, just in my daily life, is note taking, so that, because one of the hardest things for me is staying actively engaged, actively listening, and also taking detailed notes. And I've always been that way. And you kind of touched on it just now. So something that I hear leaders struggling with is the whole change management of things. I mean, with AI, there's an elephant in the room. Any organization you go to, like, is AI going to take our jobs? Is AI going to displace us? How do you view, so if you were to walk into that same organization about, implement AI, how would you approach the agents and the frontline team about that? Do you position it as an upskilling and learning opportunity? Do how does that kind of fit into the AI initiative?
Sure. It's important to address it up front. Folks understand the implications of some of these tools. Everybody's heard whether it's the Klarna experience or some of these, or the Salesforce experience. So if you're not addressing it up front, you're only leaning into that. The way I think of it is really laying out one that this is an opportunity for us to focus on those points that matter. So it's not a situation where our ultimate goal is to automate 100% of our interactions. Even if that were possible, that's not something that I personally think would be desirable to most customers. So then it's really honing in on what are the high value parts of your job, giving you the tools to be successful at that, giving you the time and the focus to be able to do that. But there also absolutely is a dimension of shifting priorities, upskilling, learning new ways to drive value for our customers. I've had members of my team who've shifted over time from, say, team lead or escalation points of contact into more program owners, being able to leverage the AI for the insights to help understand where do we have opportunities on quality, where do we have opportunities on efficiency, and having that high sense of ownership. It gives us the opportunity to give people the tools to lean into skills that would be very difficult over time to develop, and it just accelerates that entire process.
I mean, that's a great point. And you can tell you've had experience with this. And it leads me to my next question that I like to ask, which is, the reality check, so to speak. So you've implemented AI. Some people have just evaluated it. When did you realize that the pitch and the dream of AI was different than the reality of implementation, and what happened?
Right. The implementation is the biggest piece of it. So with the AI tools we have today, on one hand, at its core, they're very commoditized. We're all working off the same foundation models. They're roughly at the same parity of experience. They're significantly better than they were 6 months ago. They will be significantly better than they are today, 6 months from now. So the real value comes in how how can we take the friction off of that implementation? How can we integrate into our larger tech stack? And how can we accelerate the experience of being able to get to these high value points? Um, I have yet to see a tool in my career, and even with those that I've had a ton of success with, there is no turnkey solution. And so being very focused and having vendors that are very open and committed to the implementation and the client experience, that's where the value becomes so much easier to achieve.
Yeah, and you used a key term there is the transparency. I think in a time of extreme change and in a time of unknowns, especially when it comes to the different pricing models, whether it's by intent or token or whatever it is, you have to be very cut and dry, black and white about these things on both ends, what a brand, what a client needs, and the vendors on what they can actually do and what they're willing to be flexible on.
That, that's right. And it's a big shift to change the pricing model, change the incentive model. But when done well, I think it actually can elevate the experience. So from our side as a client and a consumer of these tools, tying the experience to kind of our core business metrics, whether it's outcomes or resolutions or kind of however that looks, it's so much easier for us to tell the story of I'm investing X amount of dollars and this is what I'm getting for it. And this is how that drives my business forward. Conversely, I love the idea that the vendor is just as tied to those outcomes as I am. And so that puts a lot of emphasis on the implementation, on the configuration, on the kind of ongoing iteration. It's so much easier as opposed to just paying for a seat. Because if you pay for a seat and as long as that's filled, all the other outcomes don't necessarily matter.
Yeah, yeah, you're exactly right. So it's really, but figuring it out together, and building something together. Sometimes I was talking to another leader the other day, and they were saying some people want a solution that's tried and true, at least as much as you can be in the age of AI. And some people are willing to, work with maybe a smaller or newer vendor that's willing to build something unique for them, or, use them as uh, a building block, or, a partnership like that. So I think it depends on, like you said, the business model, the culture, the maturation of the business. So those are all good points, Thomas. I also, so you've been in all different types of roles and all different industries. And so another question I had was, having managed, forecasting for upwards of thousands of FTEs across your career, what's the most dangerous, for lack of better terms, assumption that leaders are making about cost savings from AI, or maybe the deflection from AI?
This is a really good one. So as we think of deflection and automation, it's naturally going to see the most benefit on that transactional side of the house. So the call and response off of the knowledge base, you know, sending password resets, being able to change seat assignments, all those sorts of things. Those end up being the first opportunity for benefit. However, for anybody who's ever done forecasting and kind of handle time management, we also tend to know those are transactional for a reason. They're not necessarily the most complex work and the largest amount of time that our agents are putting in. So it can definitely be an education exercise to go to your senior leaders, go to your executive team, and help them understand it's not necessarily a one-to-one basis. If I have a $3 cost per contact and the AI solves interactions at $1 per resolution, the savings is not necessarily $1.50 in that environment, because the mix will change and the work that remains will be more complex. But if we've done the work up front, we know that we're investing in the contacts that matter. And so taking that opportunity, that should help us drive that ROI conversation to say, this is what we've been able to take off the table as just pure cost play on it. And then here's how we're investing the time remaining really against these interactions that should represent themselves in other business metrics.
That makes sense. And so how would you almost provide a safety net, or, for companies that are trying to do this? It's, as much as we'd like to make assumptions, like you said, cutting from $3 to $1.50, that may not be the case. So how can you kind of ease into it, or make sure that, you're not jumping the gun and having some of these horror stories like we've heard?
Right. First piece is going to be expectation setting. I have seen that the best rollouts are very much framed in kind of a crawl, walk, and run framework. So upfront, we target those very, transactional opportunities. We put very conservative assumptions about how that will play out and how it will play out over time, so that we don't either sell a story that we can't deliver or put the organization in a deficit. It's very easy if you cut first and then let AI kind of work your way in, you're going to end up behind the ball a little bit on that. That then should give you the opportunity to show success and then test and iterate into, are we seeing the benefits on the other side? Are we seeing other outcomes correlate to the time that's invested in larger contacts? Are we able to then maybe augment, moving from the self-service and automation piece to the Copilot experience? How can we then provide value on those other transactions to eat into that delta between the cost savings realized and what the original steady state was?
Okay. And so what are some of the immediate outcomes that you might see from, something like this?
So you can definitely get a certain level of benefit more or less off the top on this. What I've seen when I've implemented some of these like chatbot and voice AI solutions, the first tranche of that deflection is fairly easy to get. You're going to basically feed in your knowledge content. It's going to get that generative experience. More and more people are comfortable understanding that they're talking to the AI, so they won't necessarily duck out in terms of the human escalation, and you're able to get that. But that's where, whether it's the implementation piece or having a good understanding of your business and the workflows and how do I talk to the other systems, that's where you're going to chunk away at how do we get those larger complex solutions, automate them, how do we then understand how do these other tools support the other interactions, and you kind of build that value over time.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And another thing that I think about a lot, and I think at this point, especially at the trade shows that we go to and what everybody's talking about, everything's been seen as an AI initiative, right? Like, oh, this is an experiment or a project or an initiative. But at what point does it stop being an initiative and it starts being, an operational shift or a change?
Right. it's very much a shift in paradigm. I think a lot of this conversation centers on an AI specific initiative because, as we all know, it's at the top of our leaders' minds. There's a lot of willingness to invest in quote unquote AI strategy, AI solutions. So, in a lot of ways, there is a bit of branding in terms of this is the opportunity we have to take to get the resources, get the investment, get the commitment to these sorts of exercises. But I personally think the best paradigm to have is your goal is not to quote unquote bring AI into the ecosystem. AI is a powerful tool. AI is something at this point where if you're not using it, you're leaving value on the table. But the ultimate ends of our business objectives, we want to provide high quality experience for our customers in every interaction. We want to do so with the minimum amount of defects and the best consistency as possible. And we want to do so in a way that helps retain revenue, drive incremental growth, and all of the reputational benefit that we get from there. If those are at the center, then that allows us to think very intentionally about here's the best way to use the tools as opposed to working backwards from a quote unquote AI mandate.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love the way you said, if you're not using it, I hear a lot of people say, if you're not using AI, you're getting left behind. And, maybe that's in the eye of the beholder. But the way you worded it is if you're not using AI, you're leaving value on the table. And I think that that's so key because I think just same with anything else, it's kind of being seen as a trend, like it's we need to do this because we want to be part of this movement. It's not so much. I think some people are getting it wrong and not taking a step back and saying, how can this provide us value? And some people are rushing into how can we use this? How can we make, use this cool tool or make it our operations more innovative or tech forward? And so, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a really good thing to drive a culture of innovation, a culture of experimentation. Um, I've told my teams in the same way. There's obviously how we work AI into the core workflows, the frontline experience, the customer facing surfaces. But even for my managers, my insights professionals, my workforce management folks, um, you know, being very creative of how can I use AI to augment my workflow and be able to accelerate that. That's awesome. Uh, but I do think as we're thinking of AI at the core of our experience, the experimentation is helpful when we know how it very much aligns to the core goals that we have. Because at the end of the day, the business environment is different than it was, say 5 years ago on that, but there are some core values of what customers expect from us, whether they're enterprise, whether they're, B2C, and all of that. And we should maintain a high fidelity to those core values and ethics.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at it the right way, and I almost wonder if you moving across industries and even going from Noom to FuturHealth, which was relatively recently within the last few years that you made that switch. Were there AI conversations taking place at Noom when when you were still there, or is it that new that the conversations were really starting to take place in the last 2 years, year and a half?
It's definitely accelerated in the last 2 years, but AI was a key part of our strategy at Noom, not just in CX, but also as part of the core product experience. Um, I even think back, I was at Indeed before that for about 4 years, and we were a tech-enabled service, and we were very, very much thinking about how does AI, how does even in the old branding of machine learning or automation, how does that elevate the experience for, in that case, the small, medium business clients that we have? They're trying to solve for their recruiting goals and all of that sort of pieces. So the the technology has been there. It's been a foundation, but you're absolutely right. As the last few years, with how well it's advanced in terms of its capabilities, and what a lot of vendors have done, which is they've taken down the barriers, especially for those middle organizations, to see this value and not necessarily have to invest in the large bespoke projects that all the major firms are absolutely doing and are running to the head of the race on. But the democratization of the technology in the last couple of years has been fantastic.
Yeah, because what's unique about AI in that, what you just made me think of is, unlike other tools in the past, we all have access to AI now. So anybody could go and play with it, experiment with it, and use it in their daily life. I mean, you have ChatGPT, which has changed the game. I think a lot of people, especially outside of our industry, might think of AI purely as ChatGPT. But another thing I'd ask, because you have so much experience, for those who have not even scratched the surface or began, exploring AI, what would be a good way to start? Would you say it's a busy leader, would you recommend that they play with it on the back end on their own time, do some exploring? Would you recommend maybe they ask a few people on their team, hey, go play with this, see how we can use it and if we can use it in our operations? Do you have any words of wisdom?
The biggest thing is the best way to kind of understand the technology more and integrate it in is just to start. So I think in my personal life, I'm also super busy and all of that. There's a ton that I've been able to do, like leveraging Gemini to help sort my inbox and understand what are the trends that I have for the 2,000 unread emails that we have, or
Yeah.
all the great things Slack has done recently to integrate those sorts of AI summaries into the tool. That's awesome. Working directly with whether it's ChatGPT or Gemini or everything on there, taking advantage. I'm an old school insights and workforce professional, so a lot of the data analytics that was so much more complex. Dumping a CSV into Gemini and structuring the sorts of insights requests, you're able to do a lot really fast. And so the great thing now, especially like most people have Google accounts, you know, uh, ChatGPT is $20 a month. So the barriers to getting started and playing with it is extremely low. And so the faster you're able to do that, you're able to get those own values, but it also gives you a really strong understanding as you're talking to, the support AI vendors to have a better sense of, what is the range of the possible.
Okay. Yeah. I totally agree. And I wrote down a note because I want to go find the insights for my inbox as well.
Yep, yep. Fun stuff.
um, so I'm gonna challenge you a little bit or ask maybe a taboo question, but how has what part of your job, if any, and maybe this isn't the right way to word it, has gotten harder, or are there any unseen challenges that have come from implementing AI? And
Yeah.
maybe there's none.
No, there definitely is. When we take these tools and put them in front of our customers in this way, it definitely puts a different spin on the quality conversation. So everybody focuses a lot on some of the historical hallucinations, and we've all seen examples of this. Those definitely have improved over time. This is one of the areas that the models have gotten quite a bit more robust. But I today am in a kind of uniquely regulated industry with the kind of intersection of direct to consumer subscription and payments, and then also healthcare and telehealth and wellness. So that creates a lot of focus in terms of how do we drive a highly compliant experience? How do we ensure that the consistency is maintained? How do we ensure that clinical conversations are being handled by the right individuals that have the right background and the right skill and credential to be having those conversations. It's it's a good challenge. It's one that we definitely embrace, but it is very much in these sorts of industries nowhere near the sort of turn it on and let it run sort of experience.
Yeah, yeah. Just like, here we go. Now we're set up, we're up and running.
Yeah.
I think, we've heard stories of brands running into issues when they think, hey, we're just going to flip a switch and it's going to run like a well-oiled machine. Um, I like to end with, if you could put a warning label on AI or AI tools that you would never find in a sales pitch deck, what would that be?
That's a great question. I think where my mind goes is you will get as much value from this as you put into it. If it's a core initiative, which we see as, needing as much focus as any of our other day-to-day operations, then the success is actually fairly straightforward to get to. But if we're just putting it in just so that we can slap a logo on a website or put in a slide deck that we've implemented AI, you will have to end up putting in more work to remediate. So being super intentional early makes all the difference.
Yeah, because I don't know if you would say it's the same amount of effort as other, digital transformation tools, but as much effort that comes from the vendor side, they could have the best tool in the world, but the client side and the brand, there's a lot that goes into it from their side. So if it's not a core initiative internally and everyone's on the same page for the brand, you might have a hard time getting resources, like getting IT to do their part, getting operations to do their part, and the sales and all of those. So I think that that's a great thing to keep in mind. It's not make sure you have time to find AI and buy AI, but make sure you have time to implement it and work together as a team. So I think that's really interesting. Would you say a question that people might ask a vendor is, how much involvement would you need from our team the first 30, 60, 90 days?
That's a big one. I also think it's helpful to frame it on both ends. What's the investment that we should bring to the table in that 30, 60, 90? What's your commitment in terms of your share of helping us implement, helping us educate, helping us roll out? If both the client and vendor can bring the resources to bear, then those roadmaps get quite a bit compressed, and that's where we're able to really sprint on these projects.
I love that. That's a great mic drop moment. Um, Thomas, is there any projects or anything you want to promote? Is there any events you're going to be at, in the next 3 to 6 months that people might be able to find you at?
Yeah, you're more to come on that, but there's a lot in front of us. I'm
Yeah.
as you mentioned, I've been at FuturHealth here for 2 years and came in as employee number 30. So there's never a dull moment as we race forward.
And how many employees are you at now?
So we're just over 100 internal employees, and then I had about 200 FTE in our customer service network. So
Wow.
yeah,
Wow. And will you
um,
be at CCW Vegas?
um, to be determined.
TBD. Well, thank you so much for all your time, Thomas, and all of your insights. I was really looking forward to this, and I've loved watching you grow and innovate, even in your time that you've been at Future Health. And, I learn from you every single time we talk. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Kate. I really appreciate the opportunity.
And we'll talk soon.